Nebraska's headed to the Big Apple. We've got more portal movement and things happening in the coaching world. It's all very exciting. Let's talk about it next.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start this basketball season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, get started with a $150 bonus selection. If you win your first $5 bet, you get $150. Visit FanDuel.com to get started.
All right, here we go. It is Monday, and happy Portal Opening Day. We celebrate Major League Baseball Opening Day. It's officially Portal Opening Day for undergraduates today, here on Monday, December 9th.
Checking the phone at midnight.
Yeah, you never know. Connor Happer here from 1620 The Zone, and Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. So we'll be covering some of those things throughout this week. In fact, during this show, Mitch will have a good little breakdown on some of the numbers Nebraska, has to achieve on their roster by the time the season starts. So we'll talk about that. Scott Frost is back, ladies and gentlemen. We'll get to that. But let's start with the announcement of the weekend. Obviously, we had the college football playoff, and then after that, there was a little bowl selection show. Nebraska was a part of it for the first time in 8 years, and they are headed to start spreading the news to Yankee Stadium to play Boston College. Bill O'Brien's Boston College Eagles, December the 28th, a few days after Christmas in New York City, which I couldn't think of a better place to be, Mitch. It's magical, I heard.
It is. It is a magical time in December. I've been there in December. Never been there after Christmas, but you're coming up on the ball dropping in Times Square. One thing I've noticed, and I already knew, it is very expensive to go to New York in December. If you are a Nebraska fan and you're just now getting around to thinking about, hey, I should go to the bowl game, be prepared to spend at least, if not more, twice as much as what you would do for a trip to, say, Phoenix, Tampa, Nashville, Charlotte, other possible bowl destinations. There is some sticker shock. You may want to consider getting out of here through, well, depending on where you live, through Des Moines, through Kansas City. The flights are astronomical. Now, maybe some stuff will be added. I know there's obviously travel deals out there, but be prepared, Nebraska fans.
Hey, if you have some relatives anywhere on the Eastern Seaboard, you call them up and say, I'd like to stay with you guys for a couple days, and then we will commute to New York for the game. And that's the way you do it.
It's also not a bad idea. So anyway, Yankee Stadium on December 28th. I'm going to enjoy the open air press box that was built for baseball. Going to be kind of nice to sit up there. Hope it's not 18 degrees and we have computer equipment and such freezing over. This is not your grandfather's Nebraska Bowl appearance. Let's just put it that way, or your father's or your older brother's Nebraska Bowl appearance. This is something different. But Nebraska hasn't been to New York City for a bowl game since 1962. That was a historic Nebraska bowl game. First bowl victory was at Yankee Stadium, the old Yankee Stadium, against Miami. It was Bob Devaney's first season. Reports tell me that there were somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,000 fans at that game because it was so cold that people just couldn't get out and go to the game. That was the last
that weekend.
That's a great question. That would be something to look up. That was the last Gotham Bowl. It was a financial disaster, and they stopped playing the Gotham Bowl after 1962. In 2010, bowl games returned to the Bronx with the Pinstripe Bowl. It was called the Yankee Bowl in its first year, and it's been the Pinstripe Bowl ever since. And the Big Ten has won 7 consecutive Pinstripe Bowls. So the pressure is on you, Nebraska, to continue the streak and beat Bill O'Brien.
So I actually think, aside when you get away from how expensive and how much of a hassle it is to get there, like I felt like this was a bowl game that Nebraska was going to end up in for a long time, not just this year, but over the last several years when Nebraska was knocking on the door of bowl eligibility.
Right.
I think it's cool. Like I think it mixes, the big city with Nebraska, which is such an interesting thing, and then a great historic franchise like the Yankees with a great historic, dynasty-like program. The legacy program that Nebraska has. Like, I think it's really cool. I think they'll do some special things. We'll see what that looks like. Obviously, the football part of it, that might not be fun either because everybody's in the transfer portal. I saw already this morning Boston College quarterback Thomas Castellanos in the transfer portal. So is
that right? Is he their starter?
Well, he was gone from the team for several weeks during the season. I know he definitely started the season because he was the one who beat Florida State, Castellano, the little guy, and then he was gone, and then he may have came back. I don't know if he ever came back, but yeah, I don't know if they were planning on him being there for that game. But anyway, the football is going to be very wonky and weird, and the game is weird, but I do think it's cool. I just don't know if it's all that practical, obviously. So, there's a couple different pieces to it.
Yeah, Castellanos threw for 1,300 yards this year, and it looked like his playing time diminished as the season went along. He hadn't played since November 9th against Syracuse. But yeah, he's a part of their quarterback picture for sure. And that's a huge storyline going into these bowl games. Nebraska's got more than a dozen players in the portal right now. Gage Wager went into the portal for Nebraska this morning. Speaking of players who wouldn't have made an impact in the bowl game, but there are players who will make an impact in the bowl game, or would have made an impact in the bowl game, who have already gone in, and you can expect there will be more who would have made an impact in the bowl game who will go into the portal here in the coming days. One thing that Boston College does have is the FBS sack leader. Coming off the edge for the BC Eagles. I'm going to look up his name, but he has 16 and a half sacks on the season. Boston College has won 3 of its final 4. That's what the Eagles did to get to 7 victories. So Nebraska is trying to get to 7 victories, and there is something on the line for Nebraska is that you have to win this game to avoid a losing season. So Nebraska's had 7 consecutive losing seasons, and this is an important one. This is a necessary one to make it 8 in a row.
How about Donovan Iziraku?
Thank you.
Or Eziraku, something like that. Yeah. Close.
He's a first team All ACC. Yeah.
It's that's not bad. But yeah, I mean, I think there's something on the line for them. But I don't know. It's almost like talk about FanDuel with free bets and bonus bets and all that stuff. Like that's kind of what it ends up being. If you win, you could be free like, money. Hell yeah, we won. This is huge. This is momentum. This is fantastic. If you lost, you could be like, well, I guess we'll just it's okay, that we lost. I don't know if that'll be the vibe around here. I'm not sure, but that's how you would sell it to yourself.
Do Nebraska players get up and get excited for this game? What's your early read on that?
I don't know. It still feels so far away. It's more than 3 weeks away still.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Maybe that's a better thing to check in on in a couple weeks. But maybe it's different. Nebraska's play on ABC for the first time in. I thought they'd never play on ABC again. I thought ABC was dead to them. That's cool.
It's just dead to the Big Ten entirely. Yeah. Saturday morning, 11 a.m. Central Time. Tune in, watch it on ABC. You can see everybody's breath in the stadium. I mean, it's a different kind of bowl experience for sure than look, Nebraska fans haven't been used to any kind of a bowl experience for quite some time. But when they have, I looked this up too, the farthest north that Nebraska's ever played in a bowl game, other than the 1962 Gotham Bowl, was the bowl game that Mike Riley played in. No, the bowl game that Mike Riley coached in
The Foster
first year.
Bowl.
Foster Farms in Santa Clara, California. And then Nashville was the second farthest north. So when this year is all said and done, Nebraska's last 3 bowl games will be 3 of the farthest north bowl games that the Huskers have ever appeared in. They need to find a way to get back to the rotation between Miami, New Orleans, and Phoenix.
Well, that's
maybe Pasadena.
Right. You're looking at the linear progression throughout a program, right? First, it's get to a bowl game, and then it's get back to a Southern bowl game. And that would be the next step after this. I'm sure it's written, Matt Rule has many messages written on the walls throughout Memorial Stadium and the training complexes. I would assume that's one of them. Get to a Southern bowl game, 2025.
Yeah. So we've got plenty more bowl preview stuff to come throughout this month. We'll get into the matchup. We'll talk, of course, about everything that Nebraska can accomplish in its final game of the year. There's a real opportunity for young players. I would say this is maybe one of the biggest storylines, like Matt Rule even mentioned last week, that often in these situations for teams that are hit by the portal, what you do is you use the bowl game as a launching point for the next year, that it's a chance for your young players to go out and do things. And yeah, they have some old players that they want to send off on the right note, but really this is about getting young players opportunities so they can have something to build on through the offseason. And a big part of that is the practices that will get going with full steam this week in Lincoln. The Huskers will practice this week in Lincoln. They'll have visitors in from the transfer portal this weekend, maybe even earlier than that, and they'll practice next week in Lincoln before heading out to New York around Christmas. All right, when we come back, speaking of Christmas, it was Christmas in Orlando on Sunday as Scott Frost returned to UCF. There is some reason and interest for Nebraska fans, I would say, to pay attention and listen to what was said in Orlando on Sunday. We'll get to that next. Okay, nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. Omaha Steaks. This year, skip the holiday hustle and bustle and save 50% off gourmet gifts site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, you can get a $30 rewards card when you shop early and score an extra $30 off the promo with promo code COLLEGE. With 5 generations of experience, they consistently deliver the world's best steaks. And we know here from experience in the state of Nebraska and around the city of Omaha, the gifting experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtfully curated gift packages that start at $89.99. From legendary steaks to mouth-watering desserts and more, save 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners get an extra $30 with the promo code COLLEGE and a $30 reward card when you shop early. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com and an extra $30 off with the promo code COLLEGE. Minimum purchase may apply. Go to omahasteaks.com. Okay, welcome back on this Monday morning. It is December 9th. I'm Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Connor Happer of 1620 The Zone is with me. Connor, on Sunday, actually this happened on Saturday. The news broke Saturday afternoon. Familiar name, familiar face to Nebraska fans. Scott Frost, the coach who directed Nebraska through the better part of 5 seasons. You know the story. Didn't get the Huskers to a bowl game. Former quarterback, national championship quarterback. He is back at UCF. He's back, and it's like the last 7 years never happened. That was kind of the vibe that you got. Totally. Well, maybe not entirely the vibe. Do you have an opportunity to listen and watch what Scott Frost had to say on Sunday?
Yeah, I watched the whole thing with great interest. And that makes, I think that makes me one of many around here. I can't wait to watch and see what it does. I expressed on Twitter on Saturday night or Sunday, they were putting out little videos and whatever, and they did the Matthew McConaughey. Sometimes the only way to go forward is to go backwards. That thing, which it's cool. I was like, I'm kind of happy for the guy. Like, I want to see how this works. And honestly, I really do think he'll win. And he mentioned during his press conference when he returned to UCF over the weekend that, there were certain pressures that existed at Nebraska, and there were certain pressures that existed for returning to Nebraska and leaving the job that he loved last time. He clearly loved that job when he was there in 2016 and 2017 and led him to an undefeated season and a national championship and all that stuff. And I don't know, retrospectively,
national championship, put the quote marks up.
Yeah. Retrospectively, it kind of felt like he never really wanted to be here. And I know that will generate some conversation, but it'll be super, super fun, I think, and interesting to follow.
I had somebody once tell me during his time at Nebraska that, and this is when like things were not trending well, that there was the UCF Scott Frost, and then there was another Scott Frost, and it was almost like they were two different people. And I don't know. You talk about the pressure. I don't know if that's because at Nebraska, he felt like he was always trying to live up to Tom Osborne, his former coach, who played such a important role in getting Frost to come back to Nebraska in 2017. It could have been because like there was just legit pressure to try to bring Nebraska back to greatness after it had been down in the dumps. Even when he took over, there was a 1-year bowl drought, so it wasn't much of a drought. But Nebraska wasn't the Nebraska that he knew growing up. And it could have been like the all of the people and the former players who were around. There was just so much history, both good and bad. And he had the issue of wanting to come back and be around his father, who was sick and passed away during Frost's time at Nebraska. So whatever it was, it's not at UCF. All of the factors and the different things that were swirling at Nebraska, it's just not there. There was so much history in Lincoln and around the state of Nebraska. He has history at UCF, but it's 2 years of good history, not 35 to 40 years of like this roller coaster ride. So he's just more comfortable.
Yeah,
you
totally
can see it in just like everything that happened this weekend.
He, aside from that, and he mentioned that he was the same guy. I was like, I'm still the same guy. I'm just maybe a little older, like and a little wiser. He said, that was what I got too. I don't think he really seemed all that different. So like, maybe, people want to apply the narrative to the story of like, all right, well, he comes back to UCF after it didn't work out at Nebraska. He's probably a changed man. He's probably a lot different. No, it doesn't seem like it. It seems like Nebraska, his time in Nebraska, it was an outlier in his life, or at least that's the way he's sort of rationalizing it to itself. And yeah, if he wins, it doesn't look great for Nebraska. But I don't know.
For sure.
So I think that's probably why people are like, well, I don't need him to have success. I don't want him to have success. But it's super fascinating. And he admitted that he feels like he's got a chip on his shoulder. He feels like he's got something to prove. And I don't know. That's
reminiscent of like 1996 Scott Frost, who felt like he had something to prove. That was often the driving force, and I don't know if like that's the key to success for him. I mean, maybe it is. There were certainly times at Nebraska when he was the coach where he felt like he had something to prove, like after 3 consecutive losing seasons, or when his athletic director told him to stop calling plays. Like there's been something to prove for Scott Frost. Other times, for me, the key to success for him is having that weight lifted off of his shoulders and just being comfortable in his own skin. And that was rarely the case in his time at Nebraska. Even as a player, I think that he felt those kind of pressures, and it worked out well as a player because of who he was, how gifted he was athletically, how well he fit the system that Nebraska wanted to run, and the people that he had around him and the leaders that he had around him. It didn't work as well as a coach because that infrastructure was different and it wasn't in place the same way that it was for him as a player. But I was just struck so much about the comfort level. And look, there was no mention of Nebraska. He didn't say Lincoln. He didn't say Nebraska. We remember when he came to Nebraska and he had his introductory press conference. His wife at that time, they were younger and they had an infant. But it was a completely different vibe about like what was expected of the people, in that room and around the state of Nebraska about, finding a way for him to create a private setting for his family.
Yeah.
She was the first. Yeah,
he set that tone that day in December of 2017. I remember all the conversations off to the side and off the podium. It's like, hey, we're not doing this. We're not talking about this. And then, you flash ahead to yesterday, and it was like, we'd like to welcome Scott and Ashley and the kids all back. It's like this is a part of it now, and it's like
I don't care if you are mad at what happened during his time at Nebraska or whatever it is. If you have something that you don't like about him, like, you have to feel good for, because of the fact that he's able to do that. Like, it shouldn't be the way that it was with the personal private battle when it was when he came to Nebraska at the end of 2017. Like, you should have your family there at the introductory press conference, and he
didn't handle it well. There's that he didn't handle it very well, but there's also the obvious restrictions and the obvious things that are a lot different when you come here, and especially when you are him. So, like, I don't want to be like, wow, nice job, he finally got away from Nebraska. Like, he didn't handle it very well. He could have handled it a lot better.
Absolutely.
But it's definitely, it was good. It was refreshing to see him like that. Honestly, I thought that was the best part.
It was right, and it was striking. Like, Ashley Frost was the first one off the plane. Credits to UCF for doing a great job with its social media and videos that it put up, and I think they showed him for who he is at UCF, and he talked about his kids, talked about his wife, like you would hope and expect a coach when he's introduced. So yeah, we'll be interested to see. I'm interested to see who he gets on his staff. There were a lot of suggestions on Sunday that he's going to have Mackenzie Milton on his staff, the former UCF quarterback, who's at Tennessee with Josh Heupel right now, in like a support role. So I would think that they'll be getting some of the band back together from that 2016, 2017 UCF time. Maybe some other players from his UCF time who will be a part of that. I don't know if there'll be any of the Nebraska staff, that the people that he brought to Lincoln from UCF. Maybe I could see Sean Beckton. He's a UCF guy, perhaps, like, going back and being a part of that. But this is not gonna be like, okay, Mario, all right, Chenander, like let's do it again. No, that's not
definitely happening. Not. Definitely not. Maybe some bridges burned in a couple of those areas. Yeah. All right. We'll take a break. We'll come back. It is portal opening day. Nebraska got good news on the eve of portal opening day. We'll discuss that when we return. All right, it's Tapper here for the FanDuel Sportsbook. Get ready to tackle all the NFL action as we near the end of the regular season and head toward the postseason with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. There's live betting. There are futures. There are day of. I mean, you could props. You can go any way you'd like to with the FanDuel Sportsbook. So even if you get that hunch in the middle of the game has already started, FanDuel is there for you. Head to FanDuel.com and join today. You get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Sounds easy. Go take care of it right now. FanDuel.com. That is FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Okay, the portal is open, Mitch. It does feel like it has been open for longer than just, at the time of recording this, like 9 or so hours now. Mm-hmm. Because it kind of was last week. There were graduate players who could go into the transfer portal. Today's the first day for undergraduate players. But people, of course, can always declare their intentions to go into the portal, which is basically what everyone was doing last week. The big story for Nebraska was that Emmett Johnson, their leading rusher this year, was going into. Well, was he the leading rusher this year? It was probably pretty close.
Who? Johnson or Dowdell?
I don't know.
The year's not over. They're both going to get carries in the Pinstripe Bowl. So let's see.
A featured running back, Emmett Johnson, went into the transfer portal last week, and everyone kind of looked at that and they said, "That's weird. What's going on there?" Well, on Sunday night, Emmett announced that he was not going into the portal after all, or maybe that was Saturday night or early Sunday.
It's Sunday,
yeah. He was not going into the portal after all, so maybe a weight lifted off the shoulders there for Husker fans.
Dante Dowdell is Nebraska's leading rusher with 614 yards. Emmett Johnson's got 523, but he would be there. He would certainly be their total yardage leader. Emmett or all-purpose yardage leader, I suppose you could say. Dylan Raiola would be the total yardage leader, but Emmett had 262 receiving yards. Anyway, he's a key piece, a very key piece for what Nebraska wants to do offensively under Dana Holgorsen, and you saw that in Holgorsen's 3 games as the OC. Emmett Johnson's production went up and he became the featured back in this offense, and Dowdell became more of a complementary piece, a great short yardage back and somebody who came in as a change of pace. And that's the way it should have been all along. Like Johnson is more dynamic. Johnson can do the things to help Dylan Raiola in the passing game and be a much better check down back. Nebraska was mismanaging that thing for the first 2 months of the season. And you had Ramir Johnson who mixed into that, but like he always should have been geared as somebody who got fewer reps and fewer carries, because throughout his career he showed that when he carried a heavy load, he got injured, and he got injured again this season. So Emmett posted an interesting video on social media Sunday expressing his love for Nebraska, and it's a love story that's not over. So welcome back, Emmett. It's almost like you were never gone. We look forward to seeing you in the Pinstripe Bowl. You can be out at practice this week, and they're happy for certain that Emmett Johnson is coming back to Lincoln.
Yeah, I guess, I wonder if this, because Emmett Johnson was a really, I guess almost universally beloved player by the fan base, right? A guy that people would be like, hey, look, you got to put this guy in the game more. You got to get him more carries. Like everybody loved when Emmett Johnson had the ball last year. And I think people were sort of stumping for him. So I think it made it feel like some sort of betrayal when he went into the portal last week. I wonder what that does for his relationship with the fan base, which is obviously very, very strong. My guess would be that it's probably all forgotten in the matter of weeks because it is December.
It might bolster his relationship with the fan base. I mean, with what he said, I mean, we live in a different world now. And if somebody danced, with the other girl across the room, and then you came back to your your whatever your number one interest, this is college football today. And Emmett was maybe concerned about that dynamic, and that was the motivation for him to post what he did on Sunday. I don't think it was necessary. I think just the fact that he said I'm back is enough for Nebraska people to immediately forgive and forget and love him even more, because he knew what was out there on the other side, and he chose Nebraska. Some of this, is obviously about NIL. And a lot of the stuff that's going on with players going into the portal or considering the portal or coming out of the portal, you see reports now from media in college football, player X, Y, or Z has renegotiated a deal for 1 year with
new deal.
Yeah. And that's really what's happening. Like it should be phrased that way, like it's the NFL. Yeah, it's just one soda. They got a ways to get to his level, but that's really what it is. And I think that's a factor with Emmett Johnson, is that he needed to be appreciated. He wanted to be appreciated in the way that a player of his importance should be.
Okay, so speaking of the portal being this week, Mitch, you tweeted out some numbers yesterday, and it illustrated how far Nebraska has to go in terms of the transfer portal this week and what they might have to go through just to get to seemingly where they need to go. Although there's still very, glaringly little guidance on what teams need to do and when. But yeah, it's going to be a week with many, many departures. Most of them walk-ons, obviously.
Yeah, it doesn't all need to be this week. I mean, Nebraska's got until some date in 2025 to get to the 105. You don't need to be there by December 31st or even in spring football. My understanding is that it's July or August 1 when you've got to be at the 105. But you don't want to be at 120 on July 1st. So like you have to do work right now to get to that point. And that's why Matt Rule is having conversations with all of his players. And it's why he did a PowerPoint presentation a week ago today to let the players know what the 105 is all about and what rev share is going to look like. So right now, and this is a fluid number, it's about 111. I believe it's 111. This is the number of returning rostered players that Nebraska has. It does not include the players who went through senior day. Some of those could choose to come back. It does not include players who have declared their intention to enter the transfer portal. As we've seen, some of those could come back. So if you're at 111, this is Emmett Johnson back in the fold. This is Brody Tagaloa and Gage Wager outside of that number. They announced decisions to go into the portal on Sunday or Monday morning, I believe, in the case of Gage Wager, who's the walk-on son of former assistant coach Bob Wager. Add 20 incoming signees. That gets you to 131. Add the 15 anticipated portal ads that Nebraska has declared it wants to make a part of this roster. That gets you to 146. You got to be at 105. So 41 players have to go between now and August. And in what form they go, if that's players going into the portal that Nebraska doesn't want to lose, if it's players coming in and say, Coach, I know, I'm not part of this 105. Like I'm heading out. I'm quitting football. I'm going to try the FCS. I'm going to try Division II, whatever it is. Like it's going to be a mix of all of that. But you're looking at about 40 players who still need to be who still need to exit.
Scary. And then the timing of this is huge. Like I'll be really curious to see how they sort of approach it over the next several weeks, getting ready for the bowl game, and then as they go into, do you just take everybody with you to winter workouts and then make cuts down after spring ball? Because I think, Nebraska has usually gone through the practice of adding a couple more people after that point as well to their roster. Like that's the other thing. You have to, you mentioned the recruits that you have to enter into the picture. I mean, the transfer portal guys that Nebraska is obviously going to go out and supplement their roster with for 2025. It's such a moving target. So definitely complicated right now. We'll see.
I think there'll be a floating number. Yeah, I think there'll be a floating number that's above 105 during this offseason, obviously, and then off seasons to come. I mean, what you don't want to do is get it down to 105 and then have players unexpectedly enter the portal in the spring or have injury. The injury situation is going to be very interesting to see how that's handled with guidance from the NCAA. I'm still maybe a little bit skeptical that you won't be that you're going to have to count a player who's out for a season on the 105, that there won't be a way to like de-roster that player and then bring him back when he's well there's going to have to be. And even if it's not like initial guidance, like maybe down the road in a year or two, they're going to have to amend things to allow you to be more flexible with that 105, but perhaps not. Perhaps it's a hard cap, and there's no wiggle room. Somebody asked me on social media on Sunday night when I had that number in the low 40s out there, how many true walk-ons there are on the Nebraska roster. And we're talking about players who aren't getting like the NIL equivalency to a scholarship. It's about that number. Like it was about 50 during the season, during the 2024 season. And 8 or 9 of those players have left via graduation or announcing their intentions to enter the portal, like Mason Jones on Saturday, the defensive back out of Omaha Burke. So that's right about where they are. Like if you just took all the walk-ons, the true walk-ons, and just took them off the roster, they'd be at 105 or right around 105. But that's not the way it's going to work out. No. It's just not. They're going to have some walk-ons as part of the 105. They're going to lose some players here between now and next summer who are truly scholarship players.
All right, plenty to cover this week, and once again, we'll take a look at the Pinstripe Bowl as well at some point in the next couple weeks and get you ready for that. We'll likely be talking to our counterpart over at the Boston College Locked On podcast. So that is it for us today. Appreciate this being your first listen. For your second listen, check out the Locked On Big Ten podcast. Craig's puts the Big Ten first. Find Locked On Big Ten on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.